This is your reminder that the BBC has yet to address the consistent transphobic leanings in its news coverage, and while the team behind Doctor Who is not connected to this in any way since this is a BBC-owned property, I'm going to keep pointing it out until the problem gets resolved. Links in a pinned comment below if you don't know what I'm talking about. I'll stop saying it when it stops being a problem. Okay, fine. Da-da! Okay, The Devil's Chord, second episode of the latest season of Doctor Who. I think I'm just going to start calling it the latest season because calling it season 1 seems very wrong. So this is definitely one that a lot of people have expressed that they have been waiting for my opinion on. And can't imagine why. So I won't lie. I was very nervous to go into this for one very simple reason. I did not want to find myself being in the position of being a visibly queer YouTuber who talks about Doctor Who more than anything else and not liking the non-binary drag queen playing the key role. That would suck. And it does. It sure does. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's start with this right up front. I don't think that Jinx Monsoon does a bad job with what they were given and what I'm sure they were directed to do. Unfortunately, what Jinx is doing a good job of giving is something that I don't especially enjoy. It's probably worth at least briefly, without trying to get too bogged down on it, talking about my own history with drag. I have a lot of respect for drag. Long before I got involved in burlesque, I was involved in drag. But there are a lot of reasons I shifted from drag to burlesque, amongst other reasons being it just fit my performer instincts a hell of a lot better than drag did, but also just because I find what I tend to think of as high-level drag exhausting in a way that isn't particularly fulfilling. When I say high-level drag, basically RuPaul's Drag Race. Because regardless of the variations in specific aesthetic of any given queen, and regardless of the differences in persona, the name of the game is go to 11 and stay there. And while I absolutely appreciate the effort and energy that it takes to be able to do that, I get tired of it quite quickly, both on stage and in something like this. It can work for short bursts. It can work for the length of a drag number, certainly. I tend to get exhausted by it for the length of a drag show, and I was kind of exhausted by it with this. Because ultimately, here's the thing. This is very much a drag queen performance. I want to use that phrase specifically. This is not a drag-inspired performance. Ursula in the original animated Little Mermaid is a drag-inspired performance. This is just a drag performance, and that is not inherently bad. There is nothing inherently wrong or objectively incorrect about that. It is, however, something I personally don't have a lot of draw to, because the character of the maestro is introduced at an 11, immediately popping out of a piano and just and okay, but the thing is, it never wavers off that 11. Like, I can sing, I think the easiest way for me to sum this up, the maestro goes from this kind of sing-songy line delivery to this sort of vicious growling yell.
And music is mine!
Because you're just jumping from one version of being at 11 to another version of being at 11. What makes a roller coaster exciting is the transition between the highs and the lows. It's the variance. You go at 11 and stay there, that's a plateau. And no matter how much energy you put behind it, no matter how fast you run that roller coaster, I'm going to get bored by it. So ultimately, this is absolutely not a knock against what Jinx Monsoon is doing and bringing, because it seems very clear to me that they are bringing exactly what was scripted, exactly what was asked for them, and as far as I'm concerned, nailing that. The problem is that what they were asked to do is something I don't have a lot of personal enjoyment of. Like every single shot, and when I say like they start at 11 and stay there, every shot, even like the little bits of like reflecting their face like in the spoon for a hot second, it's all mugging for the camera. It's all at 11. It's too much. Vary it. Just at some point, give me a moment to breathe. And I know some people might say, well, your moments to breathe are your moments with the doctor and Ruby Sunday. Is like, that's not what I mean. With this character, give me a sense that this character has anything else going on other than just being at 11. Because, and I don't think it's an unprescient comparison to make, I can look at the toy maker, who's pretty relevant to the maestro. There were definitely plenty of moments he cranked it to 11, but there were also quieter moments. And it was those quieter moments that made the 11 moments work. And I know not everybody liked the toy maker. I did, but those variants help. And they're not here. So I want to get off the maestro, because if I keep talking about the maestro in specific, I'm going to keep coming back to this same point. I found the performance exhausting in the way that I generally find this kind of drag, this kind of high-end mainstream drag exhausting. It's just not for me. That doesn't make it bad. It doesn't make you wrong for liking it. I wish I did. I know some phenomenal drag performers who are great at doing this. I still get exhausted by it. It is what it is. So it's not bad. It's not wrong. It's not for me. Under other circumstances, I might have saved my big criticism for later. I usually tend to build up to that. But the thing is, like, the maestro literally opens the episode. That character is the first thing we deal with. And I couldn't really avoid it. I couldn't even give a vague plot outline or like move through the beats of the episode and not deal with that. So I had to deal with that immediately. So now that we got that out of the way, there is an aspect of both the summoning and the dismissal which like bugged me a little bit. I would actually be curious to know how this episode plays for someone who knows more about music than I do, because it strikes me as one of those things that it plays fast and loose with something that if someone more knowledgeable might be driven crazy by. I am not knowledgeable enough about music to be able to say, but it has that feel to it. So like there are just certain things that are hard for me to watch because like I know that's not how it works. Like I've learned enough as I've gotten older about how the court system works that a lot of courtroom dramas don't work for me anymore, because I'm like, that's not how anything works. And I know like my mother tried to watch House, the TV show, and she couldn't because she was a nurse, and she's like, none of this is how a hospital works or runs or should run or would ever run. And and regardless of whether or not it's good storytelling, and I'm a fan of House, I would argue it was good storytelling usually. That can take you out of it. I'd be curious if that's the case for musical folks here. But regardless, I did find myself thinking like the lost chord.
Clever enough to find the lost chord.
The lost chord summoned you. I'm sorry, if it's a chord that can be played on a piano, it's not a lost chord. It's been played prior to this. Like you're telling me that just like kids randomly bashing away at the keys at some point in the however long pianos existed didn't accidentally hit this? Some experimental songwriter didn't like think, ooh, let's go dissonant and hit that. And here's the funny thing. It bugs me a little bit with the summoning of the maestro. The chord that banishes them is ridiculously basic. That actually doesn't bother me. But that has to do with how the mechanics of what the maestro is doing appear to work. Because while the whole taking in of of all music. It's just seems to just be their thing. I think you could argue there's a secondary thing to that, which is that if all of this stuff is taken away, then even something that is so basic, because it could banish them, and it's so basic, it's so standard, but music's gone. So who's going to do it? And that it takes some musical geniuses in a world where music is basically obliterated. It takes people of musical genius to come up with something that basic. I can kind of headcanon that to work. Oh, since I brought them up, I guess I'll touch on the Beatles real quick. I will say this. I was so relieved when Paul stepped up to that piano. I'm like, they're not going to have John Lennon by himself figure this out, are they? Because that, like, I was already feeling like they were shafting George and Ringo a little bit. Like, narratively, I get why only John and Paul were writing songs when they recorded their first album. So if the point is like songwriting and music creation, the focus would be on them. I get it, but I was already kind of feeling like George and Ringo were getting the shaft. And if Paul hadn't stepped up to that piano too, I would have been real irritated. That having been said, these guys are not great matches for John and Paul. Like, just matching the haircut and giving John circular glasses like that. That feels like half-assing it a little bit. And I don't mean to knock the performers. I'm not sure it's I just don't think they were asked to do a more accurate or honest or truthful depiction of the Beatles, since ultimately the Beatles are a side feature in this. They're not the point. But like, I don't know, stands out. I love that the Doctor and Ruby get the period appropriate clothes. I actually usually find it fun when the Doctor and Companion do that, even when it's in a not so great episode. That was more a dig at the Idiot Slanter. This, I think, is a perfectly solid episode doing something that I personally don't like that much. So that's a different issue than saying that something is objectively bad. Like, Idiot's Lantern is a horrible episode. That is a horrible episode. This is not that. So, like, whenever I complain, if you don't see me get that serious, then ultimately, like, some stuff just didn't click for me. It's pretty rare for Doctor Who to really completely go off the rails. But anyways, coming back to it, I do like when the Doctor and the Companion dress up for the time period. The two of them and their dynamic still largely working. There's one moment that felt unearned. Well, there's one moment between them that felt unearned. There's one thing with the Doctor later that really irritated me, but we'll come back to that. And again, thankfully, neither of them are character ruining. They're more just beats that I'm like, that doesn't work. And it's not the kind of thing like, oh, that's an aspect of this character I can't work with. More like, that's a script issue. That's a line that doesn't work. But we'll get back to those. But overall, their dynamic is still working. I love that they get into the building and Ruby just goes up to the car like, oh, Janet sent us. We'll take over. And then she just turns to the Doctor.
Yeah, there's always a Janet.
I just love that as a line. I just think that's a lot of fun. And I also find it interesting they've brought the sonic screwdriver in. They're not using the psychic paper. And they may or may not, because, ultimately the reason the psychic paper was created is because having the Doctor have to come up with an elaborate story and talk his way into places is sometimes interesting, and other times it's an impediment to the story. You just want to rush through it. Here's who I am, and then just move on with it. So if they reintroduce it, I won't have a problem with that, but I like that they're making do without it so far. So moments like that, those are quite nice. Here's a random thing, and I bet you I'm the only person who thought this one. The Beatles playing badly. Like that whole... I don't think this was on purpose, but it sounded more than a little, at least to me, like Pink Floyd's first album. Like, if you know Pink Floyd, then you're thinking stuff like Wish You Were Here or Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 and, all that kind of stuff. Even, some of their light affair like Money. But no, that first album, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, I'll give you one song. Listen to the song Bike. I'm not going to play it. I'll get copy struck on it. But, like, just find the Pink Floyd song Bike from their very first album, listen to it, and tell me that doesn't sound fair bit like the bad music being played in this episode. Tell me if I'm way off base. I don't think that I am. So the Doctor has the piano get put on the roof, and they're going to try and, play some music and figure out what's going on. And we have a bit where the Doctor talks to Ruby and, brings up, oh, yeah, I'm just over there in a junkyard with my granddaughter.
1963, I parked the TARDIS in a junkyard, and I lived there with my granddaughter, Susan.
And again, I like that information being dropped casually. But then Ruby digs in on the granddaughter thing, and the show does something that I really, really, really wish it hadn't done, which is to suggest very specifically that Susan is dead, or might be dead.
Time Lords were murdered. Genocide rolled across time and space like a great big cellular explosion. Maybe it killed her too.
I understand that strictly speaking, this has been implied before, because this was implied by the very title, Last of the Time Lords, which was what was going on with the Ninth Doctor when the 2005 series started.
And the last of the Time Lords.
And that specific phrase got said again in the previous episode.
I am the last of the Time Lords.
I actually didn't talk about that in that review because I wanted to talk about it here and tie it into all this. First of all, can I just say that, yes, we had the destruction of Gallifrey by the Master at the end of Series 12. That is, for the record, the worst aspect of the Timeless Child episode. I know the actual Timeless Child reveal is the thing that we're most dealing with lingeringly at this point, or at least RTD is. And it's certainly the thing that got most fandom mad. The destruction of Gallifrey is worse. It is worse. Here's a review I did rewatching it, and you can see me really go off on that. But that is worse. Destroying it again, and specifically the idea that he destroyed everything and killed everyone. That is horrible for a number of reasons. The big one being that means the Master killed the children. The children that the Doctor went so far out of his way to save, and it was a massive triumphant moment in the 50th Doctor anniversary special. Now they're just all dead. Moving off of that specific issue real quick, but in general, the Doctor using the title Last of the Time Lords, which he did before, and he's using again, which I don't love, because all we really saw before was the destruction of Gallifrey. Now, if you just left it at that, strictly speaking, maybe some people got out. Maybe some people got off planet. I would have found it a more interesting dynamic, the idea that there's no central Time Lord authority anymore. There's no Gallifrey as a centralized hub, but there's, Time Lords and or Gallifreyans scattered to the winds a bit. I think that would be a more interesting dynamic where he doesn't know who's out there. Like, somebody's out there, but he doesn't know who, doesn't know where they are, has no real way to find them accurately. I think that would have been more interesting dynamic than jumping right back to Last of the Time Lords again. We did Last of the Time Lords already. But anyway, the point that I'm really getting to here is, while him saying Last of the Time Lords, and specifically back in Series 1 saying, I can tell there's nobody else, I would feel it, that already implied that Susan was dead. But it did just imply it. And there's always the possibility Susan could have died of old age or whatever else. But here, he very specifically links the idea of a genocide of Time Lords in a way that it wiped out all of them across all time. And he specifically singles out Susan as being a likely victim of that. And that is not okay. It is one thing to vaguely hint at, just through the title Last of the Time Lords, that maybe Susan's dead. Specifically because you're not saying how. Like, maybe it was that, maybe it was something else, maybe it was just time. But now you're saying that the Master also killed Susan. That's not okay. And maybe they'll pick up from this because maybe this is something that'll get tied up later. Maybe they're hinting at Susan because they actually intend to do something later. I probably won't like that either. I have very specific feelings about what should or shouldn't be done with Susan. I don't think actually bringing the character back, as much as I appreciate that the actress is still around, I just don't think that for how long a wait it's been, I don't think there's anything they could do that would be worth that wait to bring her back. Besides which, I have my own specific thoughts on what the best thing to do if you ever tried to revisit that is. I'm not going to get into all that, but if they never come back to this idea, then just even saying out loud the idea that Susan is dead, I hate that. I just hate it. It makes me feel awful in my gut, and I hate it. I hate it for the same reason that the idea of the children of Gallifrey being dead. That is deeply, deeply unnecessary. If you're just trying to cover the idea that he's not going to take Ruby to meet his granddaughter, for them being in 1963, you just point out, no, I'm not going to cross my own timeline. In terms of in general, you can go no, look, one day I'll go back to her, but I'm not ready yet. Because as the first Doctor, he said, one day it will come back. You can just lean on that notion. Suggesting that she is dead because of what happened to the Time Lords? No. No. Don't do that. So anyway, they get the Maestro. I like that in this time showing up, the Maestro leads in with the giggle, with that arpeggio. That was a neat link to the Toymaker, a connection that'll be made more explicit later in the episode. So that was solid. We have the whole silent sequence with the Doctor using the sonic screwdriver to create complete silence. That was pretty well done. That was nice. Like, it's not easy to do legit silence and have it be effective, compelling, whatever else. I think that worked pretty well. Gottwood sells the sense of fear that, like, he really can't deal with this. That I think he sells pretty well. There is a line from Ruby to him that feels very unearned. I alluded to this earlier. She has a line where she says,
But you always know.
I don't.
and I immediately thought, like, what? On what? But always? You barely know him. Like, that's not an incorrect sentiment for a companion to have, but, like, you haven't been with him enough to say always. That felt unearned in a similar way that Ruby getting the TARDIS key at the end of the previous episode feels unearned. It's not that it could never be earned. It's just like, that was quick. That was a little fast. So that's a more minor thing. Also, timeline's a little wonky all of a sudden, because when the Doctor is making the point that, yes, it is possible that if we don't fix this, the future, even though you are a product of it, is also destroyed, which again feels like something that has to be established for the newcomers. The Doctor getting in and being like, okay, so where are we from? 2024, June? And I was like, June?
And what time are you? June 2024.
It's hard to keep track, but yeah, I think so. June, July.
Last time we saw you, you went back to Christmas. Where's the 6 months? And it's not like a 6 months of them traveling together. Everything about when they start and she says she wants to see the Beatles, everything about the dynamic, I don't think they explicitly say that it's like their first time of her picking something really specific to go and see. But everything about that scene reads as this is like their second, like this is happening on pretty quickly on the back of Space Babies. Like, what? June? Since when? What? I don't know. That just feels like almost a typo. And again, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. But my brain does get hung up on this stuff. And a quick pause there to hear from Vera in the edit. And it has occurred to me since shooting this that might have actually been a deliberate hint and something that'll be sorted out later. If that is the case, RTD is really layering mystery box on mystery box and frankly doing more hints at stuff than I think actually is worth doing, but we'll deal with that when we eventually get stuff revealed. But anyway, they see the future, confront the Maestro again. We learn some more about sort of the connection with the Toymaker, which again, for this kind of character, since the Toymaker is already established, yeah, it makes sense to connect this kind of character to him. That's all solid. Again, it's more of Jinx Monsoon's performance, which I wish I liked. I really do. I really do. Damn it. Oh, you know what we need to talk about? Fourth wall breaks. There's a few of them in here. I don't mind the ones from the Maestro. Given the kind of being that the Maestro is, having them be a fourth wall breaker honestly kind of fits. And I actually really like the fourth wall break that starts with the playing like the bass line on the piano for the main theme before going to the credits. That's great. I love that. And honestly, again, given the nature of the Maestro, both as a cosmic entity and as an over-the-top, cranked up to 11 character, yeah, winking at the camera, acknowledging the camera, yeah, that's fine. I don't love the Doctor breaking the fourth wall. And I'm not going to say definitively that the Doctor never has broken the fourth wall, but I'm struggling to come up with too many instances that were definitive fourth wall breaks. There are like things that I would call more fourth wall leans. They are moments that seem like they could be a fourth wall break, but there's also like an explanation in universe. Like think the end of Blink with the Doctor addressing the viewer directly.
Good luck.
That can feel like it's acknowledging the fourth wall and addressing the audience directly, but technically there is an explanation in universe for why he's saying that the way he is and why that's presented that way. Here we have a couple of moments from the Doctor where like there is no explanation for that other than he's just breaking the fourth wall. The first being the line about the music and him thinking it was non-diegetic.
I thought it was non-diegetic.
In a vacuum is a really good fourth wall break line. That's a great fourth wall break line. I love that. That's a great way to break the fourth wall. So let me be clear. That's good. But I don't like the Doctor breaking the fourth wall. He's got the other one later on. There's always a twist at the end leading into the musical number. I'll come back to the musical number. I don't like the Doctor breaking the fourth wall. Because, how do I want to put this? So, Doctor Who has always been silly. Like it always has. Whether it be budgetary limits, ridiculous ideas, all of the above, it's always been silly. And sometimes the show can even be somewhat acknowledging of it. But there's a difference between like being a little bit cheeky about how sometimes the stuff looks a little bit wonky and actually like acknowledging the artifice. And there's also a difference between the show doing that and the character doing that. A bit like the Susan thing, we'll see if these fourth wall breaks are like building up to anything, if this is something that'll be referenced later. The way that I expect the snow will be, because we get a call back to that again, and also a little bit of a highlight of Ruby being somehow special or unique or whatever. I will say that as far as mystery boxes go, the integration of Ruby's aspect of that, it's done pretty well here. The idea of like pulling out this music and it's the Carol of the Bells, which happens to be my favorite Christmas carol, so like bonus points. So that was pretty interestingly done. But anyway, coming back to the fourth wall breaks, having the Doctor actually be the one to do it, having the Doctor as a character be the one to acknowledge the artifice, if this isn't a thing that's going to be built on and or explained later, I don't really like it in the moment at all, but I'm reserving final judgment for whether or not this is a thing, like if this is an early hint for something coming later. Because it might be. If it's not, I don't like it. Like, it is possible to have a main character who breaks the fourth wall, but generally that's something you want established very early into whatever the thing is. So that's part of the baseline of the audience's understanding as they work on investing in the character and the story and whatever. When you introduce the idea of a fourth wall break for a character who's been around for over 60 years, there is an implication there that he's always been aware of the artifice. And bringing attention to that, it does not automatically, but it runs the risk of lessening the stakes, of making us go, oh, well, he just acknowledged that this isn't even real. He just acknowledged the audience. He just acknowledged that music is diegetic or non-diegetic. And just for clarification, if you don't know what those terms mean, diegetic music is music that is occurring within the narrative. Non-diegetic music is like the soundtrack. It's stuff that only the audience is hearing. The characters in universe don't hear it. But like he says a line like, I thought that was non-diegetic. That implies that he's been able to hear the music this whole time. And I don't think that's an inherent problem for a main character, but to drop that on a character who's been around 60 years, suddenly having him acknowledge the artifice, it runs the risk of making it harder to invest in the serious moments, to invest in the drama. Because Doctor Who, for all its ridiculousness, the characters usually take what's going on pretty seriously. The show doesn't always, but the characters generally do. And I don't know. They haven't fully tripped over the line on that, but like I don't love it. It's not an element I really want to see integrated into Doctor Who. I've spent more time on it than I should have. Then we have the song and dance number. There's always a twist at the end. Like, it's a fun number. It's elaborate to the point that it makes me wonder, like, did they go that big and that elaborate with it so that when they did the trailer, they could pull shots from so many parts of it that it made it look, at least to me, when I saw that second trailer, oh, this is definitely musical episodes because there's all these different shots that are clearly from musical numbers, but it's all just from this one musical number. It's just spread out over so much stuff. Is that a cheat? Feels like it might be a cheat a little bit. So yeah, no, ultimately this is not a musical episode. It could have been, and given that it isn't, it is odd that they just kind of bust into a musical number at the end. It's fun enough. I can roll with it. Arguably, the nature of that is also a fourth wall break. Well, he definitely leads into it with a fourth wall break. Arguably, the song itself is. Because the song is just fun and high energy, I'm more inclined to be forgiving of it just as rolling with the aesthetic and energy of the episode than some of this other stuff, which gets me hung up a little bit. And yes, is it a little bit arbitrary what hangs me up and what I'm willing to forgive? I mean, kind of. Isn't it for all of us? Some stuff we let slide, some stuff we don't. Is it fully logical? No. People aren't logical. Welcome to Earth. We get a quick glimpse at Henry at Harbinger, which makes me wonder, because my assumption is not that that is meant to hint that the maestro themselves is going to show up again, but that to me hints that he might be the harbinger of other, let's go with progeny of the toy maker that we might see later in the season. Ultimately, I was left frustrated by this episode. Be it the general energy of the villain, which again, you go at 11 and stay there. I'm gonna disconnect just out of exhaustion after a while, and that's kind of what happened. So, you know, there's that, and there's specific egregious moments that I didn't love as well. Here's one thing that I will say though, and I want to acknowledge this right off the bat. I said in my video talking about what I was hoping for the season, I wanted to see the show take some big swings. This is a big swing. This is a big swing episode. A villain like this ending on a musical number, how stylized all this is. Yeah, this was a big swing. I don't think it necessarily worked. Not all big swing episodes do. But I appreciate that the show tried. Like this was a big idea. This was a bold idea. So even though I didn't really connect with it, and I didn't really, ultimately I like Space Babies better. I am not mad that it exists. I'm actually happy that it exists. Its very existence for me is good for the show, healthy for the show, regardless of whether I liked the specific results or not. Doctor Who being willing to take chances and take big swings will always be a good thing. And so that's why ultimately at the end I can go, I didn't super like that episode, but still be happy that it's here. So yeah, I think that's about all I've got. Thank you very much for tuning in. I don't know. Because I record these before I check what other people's opinions are, and I don't know what the general either fan consensus broadly or like the consensus of the kind of people who pay attention to what I say is on this episode. I have no idea if I'm about to get canceled when I put this one out. I don't know. I never know, which is why sometimes I end up stepping in it and not even realizing I was about to. We'll see. Whatever your thoughts on this one are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't me out, even if you can't be, I've been talking too long. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe, those all help. Links to other things I do down in the description. Don't worry too much about it though. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I am just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. Now to give my thanks to my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Barasalita, Oliver B., Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Jean Foray, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris, Melinda Walters, Jen, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Bernabi Likes the Poodle, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, White Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Toka Blahuvian, Pal Barabajagal, and Mara G. Thank you so much for your support. You can get your name said, maybe even correctly, in the Patreon support tiers. Also, it helps me feed these little buggers.